have an audio recording, and we're going to go. So the last thing that we had talked about was we were talking about Prime and how they had rescued this little Vistani girl, Arabella, and they had brought her to her father Luvash, who is the chieftain of the Vistani camp to the south of the town of Vallaki. Her uncle, Aragol, while they're throwing a party for Prime in their honor for saving Arabelle, he is overheard talking to a mysterious person, handing back money, saying that we refuse to do what was asked of us, and sending them on their way. Cinder later recognizes this person, doesn't right now, but will later figure out that this is the manservant of Lady Wachter, Ernst. And it was asked her in the recap, could I just go ahead and tell you what the exchange was here? And I thought, yeah, there's no reason I can't go ahead and do that with everybody here. Lady Wachter, because she has not made an alliance with Prime at this point, has paid the Vistani gold pieces to waylay them the next time they leave Vallaki, to try to rough them up and steal their best gear. She doesn't want them killed, but she wants them pressed into a place of desperation and vulnerability where she can swoop in as a wealthy patron and go, oh, it looks like you need resources. It looks like you need a safe place to stay. Let me help you put you back on your feet. And of course, she could, benefit from some cut of whatever the Vistani take. And, if everything goes the worst and they all get killed, then maybe she can take that to Strahd and say, look, I did this for you. Maybe I can get some dividends out of that. And the Vistani were totally going to go through with this until you brought Arabelle to the camp, which was very much a turning point in your relationship with this particular camp. And we're going to see more from Aragol in particular and how his competing loyalties are going to interact over the course of this campaign. But for now, we are just hanging out with the Vistani. We're hanging out a little bit with the Dusk Elves, but it's something that we're going to move on from and not look back at too hard. So in the meantime, we are going to scoot over to the Alpha experience for a moment. So to remember where we were with Alpha, we have just had this showdown in front of Wachterhaus. Conversely, their Lady Wachter is no longer living. That's an immediate development that has just occurred. The Burgomaster's men have liberated Vallaki of her presence, and they have given Wachterhaus as a prize to Alpha. We are not able to leave initiative before members of Alpha start sprinting inside Wachterhaus to lay claim to whatever treasures they imagine lay within, which is a bit of a problematic development because people are trying to heal and have conversations with the Burgomaster outside, while other people are insisting that they run places as fast as they can to discover things. And it does end up being something of development because at some point somebody runs into the kitchens and discovers not all of Lady Wachter's servants have been dispatched. They are ambushed by servants who have shovels, and it turns out that they are not a huge threat. One of them attempts to flee. Action Jack hits her with like a maximum damage Eldritch Blast and just absolutely blows her up on the street in front of everybody. Not a way to do non-lethal damage with Eldritch Blast. And we have scouted out a lot of the downstairs already. Lucian and Nyx have already been down here through most of these areas, sneaking about, so there aren't really any surprises here. But they also go upstairs, and here we do discover a few things that we haven't experienced yet. One of them is that when you go into one of these rooms, which has been kind of closed off, there are all these cats in there that are just roaming around, and they clearly own this space. No one else is really coming in here. They've made a huge mess of it. It's really overrun with them. There is a secret door past this place where Lucian, because he has run so far ahead of everybody else, discovers a number of treasures. He discovers, I believe, I have in my notes, 110 gold pieces, and will later come back to the party and say, hey, I found 10 gold pieces. Here, everybody take an equal share of that. And pocket the rest for himself. He also finds a number of other things. Among them are documents of like deed and titles given to Lady Wachter's ancestors by Strahd, showing that there is an ancestral pattern of subservience to the lord of this land. Lucian also finds a black tome, which we will talk about later. But we find a few characters up here too. We find a couple of people The most interesting and dynamic of which is Stella Wachter. This is Lady Wachter's teenage daughter who is mad and believes that she is a cat. She will still hold a conversation about how she is a cat. She will still say meow and ask for wet food. So they, in fact, she asks for wet food and they bring her raw steak and she hates it and tells them to get out of here. We have we spent a lot of time talking with Stella and trying to like give her therapy and understand why she is how she is, and none of it goes anywhere. So I won't really regale you with too much of that. But she ends up coming down for meals, and they try to treat her with respect, and they have a fair amount of interest toward her by and large. The other thing,
Nick's tried really hard to be friends with her.
Okay? Yeah. Nick's tried for a really long time.
We were nicer to her than most NPCs.
Yeah, and it's a thing where if like Nyx had therapist training and a lot of time to really work on this, I believe she could have eventually worked Stella out of this. The game says you should cast Greater Restoration. That's the way that you get her out of this.
Oh.
Yeah. She is mad with a capital M, and you're gonna have to do magic about it if you wanna flex her out. So for the time being, she's just kind of here as an eccentric occupant of the house. The other somewhat less eccentric occupant of the house is in Lady Wachter's bed, in her bedroom, where it is obvious that she slept every night. And this is her husband, Nikolai Wachter.
No.
Who is dead and has been for something like a decade. But she has been casting a spell on him. I forget the name. It might be Gentle Repose. That's what it would be in Pathfinder. So that he is not rotting. He is not decaying. And in fact, if anybody wanted to try to bring him back from the dead, the spell makes it still very much possible to do that. Even though normally over this span of time, it would become impossible. You would time out because of this magic that has been constantly, lovingly cast upon him. He is still subject to that if you wanted to. But we go in and look quickly around that room and close the door and never come back in again, I think.
We specifically cover him up with a blanket.
Yeah, and I think we may move him out, too. I think we might get to that at some point a little down the line here. This next slide will tell me what the next thing is. Yeah. So something else has developed in alpha at this point too. As we're coming into this session, I'm aware, I've had this conversation with George. He is super busy in all aspects of his life right now. And he is keeping open the idea that he might be able to return to this campaign in a few months. But for now, he's saying this is going to have to be my last session for a long time. So I've made arrangements for this and we're trying to develop things in that direction. Daniel is invited by Burgomaster Vlakovic to stand before a crowd with everybody, and he announces to everyone, Daniel, who fought publicly at my side, he was personally defending the Burgomaster from assassins during this showdown. He says, this is my champion, you should consider him the new sheriff of Vallaki, basically what Izek Strasny was to me. Now consider this man to be filling that role. And he's like, Daniel, you and I are going to accomplish great things together. And Daniel's like, okay, great. And in the middle of all that hubbub, a small child runs up to Daniel and says, there's a man there's an elf who wants to talk with you at the southern gate. And he gave me some money to bring you that message. And Daniel goes, I'm an elf. That sounds important. And maybe more so now because I know this is my last session and very few things have been happening to me specifically this entire campaign. So I should take this as a message perhaps of a direction I should go. And he starts to go off in that direction and then has a thought and he runs back and finds action and says, here, hold on to this cloak of protection that I've been wearing just, for no reason. And then he continues running off. And when he arrives at the southern gate, there is an elf on the other side of it who says,
oh no,
I really want to talk to you. Please climb the wall and jump over here so we can have a quiet talk and definitely won't be overheard. Daniel agrees to that. And this dusk elf says, your heritage is of this land. You are a dusk elf. And we are tied together by a shared history. And Daniel's like, that sounds really cool. And this man says, it actually is really not for you. And he draws his blades on Daniel. And it's worth saying that what happens next and even some of that maybe, is not something that we do in session altogether. George and I have a private session after we kind of fade to black on this moment where we resolve what happens here, but we do roll out a combat between Daniel and this character. It is over on the second round and ends with this character. So George then does not know for years what has happened to his character, but what has happened is that this man Rahadin has laid Daniel's unconscious body on the back of his skeletal phantom steed and ridden with him through the forest directly to Castle Ravenloft, where he intends to imprison him. Rahadin knows a secret about Daniel that even Strahd does not know. No other creature now living knows this about Daniel, and Rahadin very much wants for nobody, especially Strahd, to discover the truth. And rather than leave it up to chance, he has decided to imprison Daniel in the dungeons, a place where Strahd is not accustomed to going. He intends to put him there in the hopes of nobody ever discovering him.
Doesn't this guy look like a friend? A friend that you would love to make and
He
trust.
looks like Elrond to me, to be
Yeah,
perfectly honest.
A little bit, yeah.
everybody.
There was
Yeah.
a brief point in time I thought this was Luke's character.
Ooh, that would have been pretty gnarly. Yeah, if things had been
Why would he
Yeah.
do that?
very different. Yeah.
Well, so I didn't immediately find out that he was a bad guy, you see.
Yes.
Well, of course. How would you even think he would be a bad guy?
Yeah.
You
And in
don't
fact,
trust him.
Alpha,
Wait, Jackson here.
I
Jackson
believe
here.
I believe when everybody is present, I do flash this picture very temporarily and then take it down, and I don't post it anywhere. And I give a description that mentions a sheepskin cloak, but I am leaving it up to Alpha because that's out of character information for them to remember as much of that as they can, because they don't actually have a way in world of knowing that information. But
Well, you did describe him very well when he showed up,
Yeah.
and Jack isn't here to annoy about this anymore, but Jack was very pissed off at the fact that we didn't immediately address this man.
I very much intended for there to be an out of character suspicion of this character next time we meet him, but we'll talk about that when we get to that point in this campaign for sure. But
He's a trustworthy lad that we can be friends
look
with.
at how trustworthy he is. So other characters are not aware at the moment that Daniel has disappeared. They spend the night in Wachterhaus, enjoying their own bedrooms. Some of them, others are
Snuggling with cats.
sleeping on the couch. Some of them are snuggling with cats. They are listening to Stella Wachter scratch on the door and things like that. But we get up and we describe all the breakfast everybody makes for one another. And as everybody's coming down for breakfast, Lucian comes down. He has slept all night with this black book in his arms. And he comes down and is holding it, and he's trying to figure out how to open it because it's bound with all these locks. And Lucian has, I believe, rolled a check to maybe know something or understand something about this book that he has failed. But others at the table, including Nyx and Peregrine, who are very versed in Arcana, do very well. And I tell them that they recognize, well, okay, I say that. They do pretty well. And that'll be important for later. They recognize that this is the grimoire of the Four Quarters, a diabolic tome that was written by whatever the opposite of a saint is, this famous heretic who was later drawn and quartered into four pieces. These are the four quarters mentioned in the book, and these are these incantations and rites and prayers to Asmodeus, to the devil, to the Prince of Darkness, written by him. And to read even one word of this book has a chance to drive the reader past the point of madness. So they say to Lucian, hey, maybe stop trying to open it. But Lucian will keep this book on his person despite their attempts to convince him to be rid of it, and he will imagine that it whispers things to him at night, and that there are secrets within it, and that he should keep it close to himself at all times. As they are cleaning up the Wachterhaus and sort of making it a better living place for themselves, part of this effort is disposing of the corpses, both fresh and like the old skeletons that they fought in the cellar. They want to dispose of all of these, so they've invited local gravedigger Milivaj to come over and cart away these old bones and these new bodies to the church cemetery. In the course of this, they're discussing what a huge revelation it was that Lady Wachter had all this horrible stuff going on, and Peregrine turns to Milivaj and says, "You got any deep dark secrets you want to confess, Milivaj?" Milivaj has some deep dark secrets that he wants to confess, and he does, because he believes that this is them playing mind games with him and finally catching him in a vice. Part of this is that, remember how Alpha earlier found out from him that actually all these bodies were missing from the graveyard? So these skeletons that they fought in the cellar are those bodies, he realizes. Lady Wachter has been the one having her cultists steal bodies from the church graveyard so that she can animate them and hide them beneath the floor of her cellar as a defense mechanism. And he realizes that. He also realizes there was this huge evil cult presence in town that he was super unaware of, and the damage that could escalate to. I mean, there was this brawl in the streets. He walked over the stain of a person that actually exploded yesterday, and can see the dead Lady Wachter being fed upon by ravens in the field as they are having this conversation. So he says, "Yes, I am so sorry. I am responsible for the theft of Saint Andrew's bones, and the coffin maker ordered me to do it." And it's just Peregrine in action having this conversation with him, and they're both like, "Oh, well, you did the right thing in telling us." So they have a couple of different things they could work on now, but coming a little more immediately to their attention is they realize at this point that Daniel is missing, that they don't know where he is, and they kind of do enough snooping around to realize that nobody does. They end up finding this child who says, "Oh, I told him there was a dusk elf who showed up and wanted to see him, so I told him to go to the southern gate." They go to the southern gate, they go beyond it, and they find blood in the grass. They find signs of a struggle and horses' hoofprints leading off into the woods. They don't want to just go into the woods of the Swallows Woods after these footprints, but they do have the lead that a dusk elf was involved, and they have heard that dusk elves surround the Vistani encampment south of town, so they head in that direction, which is the first time that we arrive here. From in the high Vistani tent on the top of the hill, they can hear the sounds of somebody being whipped. And obviously that's like a personal thing with the Vistani that we don't want to interact with. So we don't go up there. We never meet Luvesh, and we never find out what all of that was about. Instead, we do talk our way into one of these dusk elf cabins, and we meet Casimir, their leader, who in this campaign, it is told to them, resembles Daniel quite strongly. Despite just they're both being dusk elves, he looks quite a bit like him. And Nyx takes on the countenance of Daniel in front of Casimir to say, "Hey, we had this friend who looks exactly like this." And Casimir goes, "Oh geez, I don't know who that is, but I will admit he does kind of look like me." They ask him, like, "Do you have any kin, or lost kin that Daniel could be?" And he says, "Not that I'm aware of. I don't have any children or anybody like that. And in fact, I'll tell you some of the sad story of the Dusk Elves at this time. And I don't have a super strong lead for you, unfortunately, about where Daniel is. I don't know what's happened to him." And they are unable to provide him with a description of Rahadin that is enough for him to say, "Oh," because he knows who Rahadin is. For him to put two and two together and give them a plot thread in that direction. So we kind of come up against a wall here. He does offer to them that if they ever want to venture to Mount Gaucus, they should come back and get him, but that's not really what they're here about. So I think that kind of, like water off a duck's back, kind of slides off, and they're left to kind of, and they all know that George has left the campaign, and it's because of the mystery around his disappearance that they've done such due diligence into trying to figure out what happened. But I think they're pretty ready to accept, like, oh, this is just like a mysterious thing that we'll have to follow up on later and is not the main plot for right now. So we're going to go back to Vallaki, and Action goes to the Burgomaster and says, "Hey, remember how you made Daniel your, town champion yesterday? Well, now he's gone." And the Burgomaster says, "Well, no matter. You're my town champion now. In fact, I'm calling you the sheriff. You are in charge of the guard. And, oh, by the way, some of them have just come back. A few survivors of the half dozen that I sent to find your companions have straggled bloodily back into town. And so we have a few more guards than we did the other day. And they're at your disposal if you need them for anything." And Action says, well, that's a crazy coincidence because I actually want to take some with me to investigate this coffin maker shop. We have just learned that this is the origin of the mystery surrounding these bones. So we take some guards with us and we go to check this out. It's about an hour before sundown when we arrive. We knock on the door. The door is creaked open just barely by this coffin maker, and we have a conversation where we're like trying to suss out like, hey, can we come in? Can we like talk about stuff? He's like, no, you can't come in, not without a warrant. Like, what's going on? He's clearly very defensive, very fearful, really does not want to let them in. And Action says, he like tries to convince him and successfully does to crack open the door like a little wider. And he says, so can I see the area directly behind him? And I say, yes. And he says, okay. So he misty steps directly behind this man inside his own shop as an intimidation tactic and a way of gaining entry. This is one of Action's 2 warlock spells that he can get before resting again. And it absolutely works. We've absolutely got this guy shook. He realizes he can't keep the party out, and so he drops his voice to a whisper, and he's like, okay, I'm responsible for this, but you have to know something, that it's not my idea. It was given to me by these by Strahd and these vampire spawn who work for him, and they're still here now. He shows them a coffin on the lower floor, and they find a sleeping vampire spawn within it because it is still daytime. It is an hour before sundown. And he tells them there's one here and there's others upstairs in those coffins. And they realize they have a decision to make because they don't know how quietly they can stake and like kill a sleeping vampire spawn. There's a chance that if they dispatch this one, it will awaken the ones upstairs prematurely. They also, learning that there's all these vampire spawn, they're like, okay, we need a little bit of time to make stakes. We also, if you're doing the stake method, you need holy water for that. So we're going to try to scrounge some of that together really fast. And Action has just spent one of his 2 spell slots per short rest. So they decide it is worthwhile to short rest before having this encounter, which does mean that they do come in, and I believe we do still stake the one that is downstairs while she is sleeping. We get an automatic stealth KO on her, but it happens right as she is awakening, with the sun going down, and right as the ones upstairs are awakening. So we are ready for this fight. We know that it's happening. We have eliminated one right off the bat, but all the rest of them are still up there or in other coffins somewhere in the building and coming out, and we do just have a big bang up fight with them. So this still is pretty hairy. So Alpha is 1 level up on where Prime was, and they are prepared for this. But they end up getting split up between different levels. Once again, we have people getting thrown out of windows or jumping out of windows. We have people cut off from one another because of the verticality. Peregrine has a hard time getting everybody within the range of her temporary hit point buffs. And I'm also, because we've had Prime like a while ago do this encounter at this point and saw how badly that went, I'm more on edge, and I've made sure this time that there's kind of an ace in the hole that can come in if things start to look really bad, or to keep them from getting too bad. And I can justify it a little easier because Alpha's been in town longer than Prime was, and they have a number of characters who are interested in what is happening to them and might ostensibly be watching them. And one of them, who has been watching them for a little while, especially since they set fire to a wolf hunter the other day, which he then tended to that man's wounds. The carnival master Rictavio is at his carnival wagon not that far away when the sounds of combat erupt. He comes over and asks a guard or a townsperson standing nearby what is happening. They tell him that the party has gone in and are fighting vampires inside this house, and he knows he has to make a decision to do nothing and hope that these strangers can survive this vampire fight, or to interfere in the hopes that he can make the difference. He has been a month here undercover in Vallaki. He was a month at his tower before that, making sure to keep a low profile, and he decides to gamble all of that on intervening now. He runs into the building to join the fight with Alpha. They discover that he is extremely adept at fighting undead with his sword cane, that he has a silver sword cane, which was hidden just in his cane. They didn't know about it. And he casts healing spells upon them. this is a pretty dire fight. Lucian goes unconscious at some point and has to be revived. People are very hurt, and the vampires at a certain point realize, okay, we are dishing it out pretty good, but we are not really close to taking anybody down. They are dishing it back to us pretty well, but they don't really have radiant damage, so this is kind of a stalemate fight that we might win eventually, but it sounds like more guards might eventually make it here, and we don't know what resources they will have with them when we do. So they begin to flee. They have the bones of St. Andral, and Action lines up a shot at one of them that is running and aims for the box, and he blows it apart with a eldritch blast, and the bones are scattered on the ground. The vampires abandon them. They pretty much all of them, I think, escape, but the bones are left behind to be collected by the party.
That's smart. That's a good idea.
Duncan Peregrine fairy fired.
Yeah.
And which gave me advantage on the shot, which I would have missed.
Specifically fairy fired the box. Yes, it was a 1-2 tactical setup that they did between the two of them to pull that off. Yeah. They also have Henrik Vandervoort as a survivor of this encounter. They got him out of the building before any of the action kicked off. So they are able to question him at length. He tells them that Strahd appeared out of thin air in his coffin shop with these vampire spawn. He is unaware that they teleported in with a teleportation symbol that Strahd basically set up here in secret, intending always to use this place as a hideout and a way to secretly get into Vallaki, and told him to do all of this, but he doesn't really understand why. And he gives them the bones. They collect them again, and Peregrine casts Detect Magic on them and discovers that they are not magical. To which they go, oh, so I guess Father Lucian Petrovich was just like a superstitious old guy who believed that these bones had this power that they don't really. So they do return the bones to St. Andrew's Chapel, and they go about their business. And the truth of it is that it doesn't tell me that St. Andrew bones are magical in the traditional sense, and they're certainly not listed as an item. And I believe that their intention here is that the power that they exude is kind of a higher one and a more of a divine effect than actual magic, because indeed the bones of St. Andrel do protect his church, and Strahd or any other undead cannot enter it while they are there. Which means that that church is now safe from any attack by them. But in any universe where this were not the case, the church would still be vulnerable to an event that the book refers to as the Feast of St. Andrel.
What?
Which is set to occur the night before the Festival of the Blazing Sun, which for Alpha would have been the next morning. So they were right to act when they did, because that means that what happened to Prime at midnight on this night would not happen to them.
Oh no.
Okay.
They see in the late evening swarms of bats over Vallaki, great clouds of them, all going down the road to the west. They hear the distant clanging of the church's bell, and they understand that something tumultuous is happening. They run in that direction. At the same time, they are aware that this is the session where Christy is joining their game. I have given Christy... I've done a few things with Christy. One is that I know that Prime has a fated companion they were supposed to meet at some point, but that it would not make sense for that to happen for a while, and would force me to do a lot of work to make that introduction happen early. But I have this other character that I think is more in tune perhaps with Christy's personality to some degree, and I think that perhaps Christy would more enjoy playing Esmeralda d'Avenir than the fated companion. So it is at this point that Esmeralda, the Vistani vampire huntress, has her adventures bring her to the outer wall of Vallaki. We are with Christy as she discovers that the guards on the outer western wall are dead, drained of all their blood, with puncture holes in their necks. She hears the clanging of the bell. She sees the swarms of bats darken like storm clouds over the church. She sees the adventurers come up along the road. She runs and meets them outside the church. Very frantic, quick introductions are passed between her and these other party members, and together they kick down the door of the church, and inside is Strahd von Zarevich.
What?
He has, at the end of the church aisle, Father Lucian Petrovich, I'm going to say he looked like this, they don't give me his art. He has obviously charmed the father and has already drunk some of his blood. Also, crawling on the walls are 4 vampire spawn. And he invites the party, he opens a dialogue with them, and this is where it is important that we remember and have been talking about how Taylor and Sparky were feeling in this campaign at this point. Like, we had a lot less combat and a lot more open world decision making. We had a lot more intrigue than we thought we were going to, and both of them had come to me at this point and said, we're considering playing different characters, trading out Dr. Flint and trading out Cinder, who are both like really combat capable people, but we don't really have backstories for them. We're really not coming up with backstory stuff for them. We would kind of be interested in finding some way to move them out of the campaign to open up space to bring in new characters. And I had said yes to that. And I said to them, I'm going to present an opportunity for you to do that if you want. It will be upcoming in this session. And Strahd says to them, I am interested in the 2 of you in particular. I have heard about your feats in battle and your brashness and your bravery. I would like the 2 of you to join me. Come with me now to Castle Ravenloft. Or die here. If you refuse me, I will kill you right now. And they refuse him. And so we roll initiative. And this is our first time meeting Strahd. This is certainly our first time fighting him. I think I may have duplicated this slide by accident. No, it's because I had I was here going to line up that he is specifically talking to these 2 characters, but my only objective for Strahd in this fight is to target the 2 of them, and this becomes pretty immediately evident as he makes a beeline for Cinder. He casts his 5th level spell, Animate Objects, to animate the doors to the church, which slam shut behind them, and now will do athletics checks to resist being opened as an action. If somebody wants to open the doors, they will have to use their action to overcome their athletics. He also animates the sword on his hip, which, like Castlevania style, just speeds off and begins making its own attacks at them. He is focusing all attacks on Cinder. He is not using any legendary actions during this fight. He is only acting on his turn. He is still, it seems, trying to get the measure of the party and their strength. This becomes more apparent as they are also fighting with the vampire spawn, whom they have extremely traumatic recent memories of fighting, but they are this time more prepared. They have Esmeralda with them, who has a magical rapier. She can cast magic missile and lightning bolt, and all of the damage from those goes through. They understand their regeneration better tactically. Strahd casts fireball at some point on the whole party, which does a fuck ton of damage. But they push back from that, and they figure out how to heal. He also, I think, catches at least one of his vampires in that, in an attempt to include more foes. At some point, Strahd says, why do you continue to disappoint me? When the party doesn't quite destroy a vampire spawn, he says that. And the vampire spawn says, I'm trying my best, master. And he says, I wasn't talking to you. And it becomes clear that Strahd has contempt for these spawn that he's brought with him. And the party realizes that he is giving them feedback based on how well they are fighting these spawn. So while doing their best to survive his attacks, they pivot, keeping that in mind, and focus their attacks on the spawn the best they can, and eventually destroy all 4 of them. At which point, Strahd backs off and invites them to reconsider sometime, to join him at Castle Ravenloft. A swarm of bats flies through and engulfs him, and when it is gone, so is he.
The bat can be whom?
All right, I have so much to say about this fight.
Yeah.
But first off, and Ashley can corroborate this, Shava teleports into one of these windows that are like up on the walls. And it's like doing scantrips and
It
stuff
got
from up there.
broken at one point, and so I just Misty stepped up to the window so that I'd have an exit point
Mm-hmm.
if need be, because I have to be able to see where I'm going.
I can't remember if that happened after the fireball or if you escaped the fireball because you had done that.
I think so.
I'm pretty sure, I'm actually fairly certain I was on the back end, like I was behind the fireball. It was like Esmeralda and I were back right at the door.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You guys went for the door at first. And so another big thing that happened in this fight is that I was using all my spells to heal Cinder because Strahd was really focusing Cinder. And at some point, I managed to stay up from the fireball because I was also taking a lot of hits. But I managed to stay up from the fireball because I resist fire, and I'm pretty sure I succeeded the save. But at some point, I ended up with like single-digit hit points, like maybe even one hit point. I had one healing spell left, and I used it on Cinder. And also was having Hellbender give Strahd disadvantage on attacks against her. And yeah, it was really intense. It was really close.
You guys did it on me.
Yes, and also like
Opportunity that Alan clearly gave you.
yeah, and so like Taylor and I had also been like discussing this, and Taylor and I frequently would be on Facebook messaging during these games, and I'm pretty sure that like during this session, like during this lead up, we were like messaging each other, still like gauging how we felt about it, and we're just like it was really pretty in the moment. Like I think we'd started leaning towards like keeping these characters, especially since the last few sessions had been a lot of fun. But that it was like it was not a done thing. It was to an extent a moment decision.
In fact, if Alan had presented a different kind of pathway for the characters to have exited the campaign, then that might have ended up having a different outcome. But, I mean, I liked the character well enough not to, like, want that future for her, I guess. So.
I will say, I actually thought it would be really fucking cool to have Cinder.
It would have been really cool, but I like envisioned a weird future where my new character could have to like fight my old character, and I didn't like that. So
yeah, I had been feeling this anxiety from these two for a long time, but by virtue of the fact we were able to get to this point, I thought this was the best way to handle it because in my possession it felt like, and this hinged on you guys like being okay with this kind of traumatic encounter where it's obvious the stakes are suddenly so high, but a few things can happen. One is that the two of you are killed and you go out in a blaze of glory fighting the boss of this campaign, which, you know, hope is the way you would hope for any character to die if they're going to die, is in my opinion. Another one would be that you accept his offer. That you're like, okay, as long as I'm leaving the campaign, it might as well be in such a way as like, I don't really know what would happen. To peel back the curtain on that now, whatever new characters you made and the rest of the party absolutely would have seen your characters again, and they would have been vampire spawn. I would have revoked control of them immediately upon leaving this scene. And they would have, I think, given the fact that they made that choice, had an attitude of like, yes, Strahd has given me great powers that I didn't used to have. Ooh, very scientifically interesting to be able to regenerate and all these tremendous experiences. And look, he helped me soup up my Hellbender. He's like more powerful now. And Cinder would be like, I've always been biting people. This way I get to heal from it. But more British than that. That would have given me something in my arsenal for later, but I honestly was kind of hoping that what would happen was what did happen, which is because most of the complaint I was getting was like, we just haven't found something in this campaign that our characters have been able to sink their teeth into to like really hook them into what's happening. I'd kind of hoped that having to make this choice and feel like it'd be the ultimate thing of, you know, do I like this character enough to fight for them to live? And then having said that, can I pull it off successfully? And they did. This was no small feat here. Strahd's not using legendary actions, but he does a lot of damage. He's doing like 5 dice of damage whenever he just punches you, plus a modifier. And he's throwing fireballs. And I did not purposefully take it easy, except for there may have been some rounds where it became really clear that you guys had understood the assignment, where he is testing you on these vampire spawn. He has brought them as fodder for you. And when you started to lean into that, I think he started to back off more to just kind of observe you doing that. But you all held up under that really well. And when the dust settles, the vampire spawn are gone, and you are all still alive. And I think the only character that goes unconscious at any point, and this is important, is Yester Strahd. And
who did a lot of work, by the way.
Who did a lot of work, has a big axe, and used it, and had a lot of hit points, and put himself in harm's way to intercept hits that would have really been bad for other people. I'm pretty sure there was at least one point here where Tox was trying to like purposefully take a hit harder than he should have or something like that, and we have to do another check. I'm pretty reasonably certain that there's some other check in here that has to be done. But at the end of this fight, Yester Strahd is unconscious. So then we have to settle the question of, okay, but is Tox unconscious? Because he's a ghost. He is, while possessing Ezek, using Ezek's senses. So I think we end up with something like, okay, if you stay in Ezek, it's just kind of like a dark room. So you'd have to like leave in order to get your ghost senses. So he does. He floats out. The party has kind of spilled out. They're like caught between the church and the street because by now people have surged in and they want to figure out what's going on. Like they're responding to this situation. Father Lucian Petrovich, unfortunately, has died. Strahd's first action in combat was to drink the rest of his blood and leave him to do death saves, wanting to see if the party would go and spend action economy trying to stabilize him instead of fighting. Nobody does run over to the father, and he bleeds out, failing 3 death saving throws. So he has passed away, and despair threatens to creep over the town from this. But a couple of townspeople are here in this room looking at unconscious Ezek, and Derek formulates a very specific long-reaching plan in a moment. And maybe this is something he'd been working on already, but he starts to work on it very quickly. He says, Alan, do any of these people give off this same feeling of like vacantness to me? And I say, sure, there's one who does. And correct me if I'm remembering any of this wrong as I go through this, by the way, because this is purely me speaking out of memory from back then. He says, okay, I possess that person. So maybe that was the 5th check that happened. And he says something along the lines of, the burgomaster could not keep this town safe. Yester Strahd could not keep this town safe. The time for a revolution is at hand. Picks up a knife and coup de graces Yester Strahd, this seemingly random Barovian villager who will remember this for the rest of his life and wonder what came over him. Stabs the town's henchman to death in view of many people and starts shouting like, down with the burgomaster. And this resonates with people very clearly. The burgomaster and his all will be well bullshit is not capable of defending Vallaki. Instead, it is these adventurers who chased out Strahd at, the cost of their father, Father Petrovich, but like they're the ones who did anything about it, and it was violent uprising and action that
it was
did that.
The tyrant.
Yeah, down with the tyrant. People start to shout.
It was freedom from the tyrant that Tox incited as the chant for the crowd.
Yeah, Tox sets this off, and it makes it seem like the party is not at all the instigator of this movement and this mentality, but like a wildfire in the middle of the night, it ripples through the city. People go immediately to the burgomaster's mansion and drag him and his family out and put them in chains. The party has to intervene before they are stoned to death. They do go and take Yester Strahd's body and burn it in the city square. The burgomaster and his family are imprisoned, except for young Viktor Vlakovich, who I believe they just hear about this. As people were coming for him, he cast a spell and took off into the air and has not been seen again. And the party goes, oh, okay.
He was still in the house when we got there. we went up, checked his room, and he was like, "I'm not coming out."
I think he flees to his room. Is I think what happens. I think he is first seen outside of that. But I do have a memory, I think, of you learning at this point that he has fled there, seemingly by magical means.
How did they bypass the mastiffs? How did they deal with the?
Oh well, they're dogs with like 5 hit points, so it wasn't particularly difficult.
Today I don't remember anything about the mastiffs, so that might have been behind the scenes. I don't actually remember the fact that he had dogs.
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like I kind of remember that we just like closed them in a room at first.
Oh yeah, I think that happens later.
I feel like they were closed in a room for a while.
Yeah, I think they're like shut in the library.
We just didn't go in there for like a while.
Yeah, because again, they just have the statistics of like dogs, so they have like a bite attack.
I actually don't remember if we ever dealt with them. We might have just completely forgot about the mastiffs.
They just started.
No, I think we did. I think I remember that we like let them go or something. Eventually, it was like days later.
So what this means is when the sun rises on the next morning, the burgomaster has been deposed, and there is no festival of the blazing sun, unlike in the alpha game.
Can I ask a quick question since we're moving on?
Yeah.
I should have asked it earlier, but what was Prime's opinion of Strahd, since you had the more sympathetic?
Good question.
That's a great question. Yeah.
How did you feel before he gave you an ultimatum? Like, did you think that there was hope that you would, help him out? And did it even change after?
I think for me at least, it was okay. I'm sympathetic to the fact that this guy had some shitty stuff happening to him, but also sympathy doesn't get you all the way to becoming a dreadlord and terrorizing the citizens of a country. So it pretty quickly took me from having the amount of sympathy to no, absolutely fuck that guy.
For me, honestly, what it came down to was like how the fight, like this particular fight, actually really shaped how I thought about Strahd, because with the vampire spawn and the bones and the priest and everything, that all seemed pretty just straight up villain. But then he kind of like toyed with us and he tested us, and he pretty sincerely, like he was like pretty nice, honestly, to me and Cinder about like, yeah, just like come join me, and then like having our actual test be to beat the spawn was kind of like interesting. We weren't entirely sure what that was about, or like why he set us up to do that. And so it created like an opening of like, oh, maybe we can kind of work things out with Strahd if we like do, or I don't know. It created the concept of a paradigm like that, right? Like maybe there was some kind of hope for dealing with Strahd in a way that was non-lethal with him.
Yeah. It was also kind of, I mean, there was like a little bit of flattery in it, because at least for Cinder was, taking a lot of damage and dealing a lot of damage in what few fights we'd had. So it was like, oh, cool, being noticed, yay. But also getting tested by having to destroy spawn. Like I remember at one point kind of thinking, does on some level he hope that we might be victorious and like remove this curse for him? Like how self-aware is he of that? But I mean, it definitely never did extend to like, if it came down to it in a fight, we're gonna deal lethal damage. Like there was never a question of that for me. It was just sort of like I was explore the possibility that there might be an alternate way if it was like conveniently kind of placed, but if he was like doing something terrible, then we were going to take him out.
I think I felt the same as pretty much everybody else, where it was like, look, he's clearly a bad guy doing bad things, but potentially this is caused by this curse or by whatever the Vistani want us to try and fix, and so maybe we yeah, if we find along this journey a non-lethal way to deal with it, like, he's probably going to be answering for some crimes, but at the very least, he might deal with it for us if we, like, reawaken his conscience. Later on, we're kind of realizing, no, he was kind of always a shitty person, and the only release he really deserved was death.
Yeah. I liked, too, that we, even in this fight, or, like, in the moments right before it happened, there was a bit of an attempt to parlay with him, where Cinder says something to the effect of, is there anything we can do to not have this fight? And Strahd says, yes, join me. And she says, okay, is there anything else that we could do? And he says, no. She's like, are you sure? And he's like, how long are we going to talk about this? Like, giving the impression like he is willing to make deals, but he's going to have a hard time accepting any other terms than his own. And if the party is going to attempt to set terms, they're going to need to come to the negotiation with something to put some more weight on their side of the scale.
Also, is this the fight where Cinder destroys the sword?
Yes, because it is not a magical sword or a sword with any properties. It is simply a sword that Strahd had that he cast animate objects on, which is a creature animated sword, which has like 16 hit points. So I hope it felt really awesome when your first round of combat, you just like sliced it out of the air and absolutely shattered it. Because it was the best I could have asked for from that moment, and I think perhaps a little surprising. But yeah, Strahd does not have any magical weapon of any kind. He considers himself a wizard, and his attacks deal so much negative energy when he hits you, so much necrotic damage, that it would absolutely not be worth his time to use a weapon, which would not imbue that.
Gotcha.
So we can definitely come back and talk more about this moment later, and especially out of this session, I think this would be a really ripe thing to talk about. But I do also want to talk about this encounter, the Festival of the Blazing Sun. So the Burgomaster has said attendance and children required. Everybody has to be at this festival, like it or not, we are doing this. And it is imperative that everybody show up, which is a bit of a problem because until now, the party has been keeping Irina secret in the Blue Water Inn, but there is no escaping it. She has to come here. Ismark accompanies her, and children are required as well, so we've got these two. And we also, the whole party meets for the first time, just kind of wandering around the Burgomaster's dickhead teenage son, Viktor Velakovich, and Nick's knowing that, I think we've heard rumors, or you'll have to remind me how we know this, that Victor is a spellcaster of some kind, or like...
We had heard some kind of rumor about that. That was nothing much to it.
Perhaps more importantly, has this dour, edgy teenage affectation.
The Burgomaster had told us. He was like, yeah, that's my son lives upstairs. He's like, he's always in his books. Anyway.
Yeah. Clearly they're cut from different molds, he and his father, and maybe thinking like, oh, this is like a teenage rebel I can talk to. Nyx tries to talk to Victor, and he's just an absolute heel to her, just a huge dick, and she was really hoping for anything other than that. So they immediately hate each other.
Ever, and I can't repeat this again enough, ever forgives him for this.
Oh yeah, just for him being really casually rude and like demeaning to her. He's like, aren't you like a child? Why would I talk to you? And she's like, wow, fuck this guy. So this is a scripted event scripted to the extent that they give me some dialogue and some things that happen in a sequence. The Burgomaster assembles the town. He says something to the effect of like, welcome to this festival, all will be well. And he goes to light this huge brazier. They've been, over the course of the last several days, anytime anybody goes to the Burgomaster's mansion, they're collecting sticks and hay and anything else that will burn to make a giant like pile of stuff, a huge bonfire that they've built here in Town Square. He goes to light it and it starts to rain and it fizzles out. And one of his own guards just laughs at the tragic irony of the situation. And the Burgomaster sees that man. and it becomes clear that he is about to make a public example of this man, that he has been felt so humiliated and is so angry in this moment that he is coldly going to do something very bad in front of the whole town to demonstrate that you don't react like that in front of the burgomaster at one of his festivals. And one person steps forward who has been in a room where he has not seen all of this unfolding in Vallaki. He hasn't been aware this is the extent of this situation, but he was raised by a burgomaster that taught him that leadership is service and that this is something you do for the people. Ismark steps forward and says, "You do not deserve to be burgomaster. I will stand against you in front of everybody." And Irina and the rest of the party stand with him. And there isn't much of an encounter here. There are a few guards who are willing for a moment to stand with the burgomaster, but he is not himself a threat. He does sick his dogs on the party, and unfortunately they are killed. And very quickly, with good charisma-based skill checks, the rest of the guards turn against the burgomaster. The townspeople pick up stones and begin to throw them. The party gets them to stop. Just like in Prime, the burgomaster and his wife are arrested and dragged away. Unlike in Prime, we have Victor here on this scene. He casts a spell and flies up into the air. Nyx, what spell was it, Nyx? Was it Firebolt or?
It was.
It might have just been.
It was Firebolt. I guarantee.
She firebolted him.
I thought that was the case.
Time, and I can't remember what my reasoning was.
Well, I think the reasoning was this guy's a dick and he doesn't deserve to get away. I think we also maybe know that Fly is a concentration spell, and if we can just hit him hard enough, he might drop. That doesn't happen, so Victor casts Fireball on the crowd. Nyx, I think, is knocked out instantly. Several guards are killed outright by this, and the burgomaster's dogs are charred away into bone with melted flesh dripping off of them. Victor zooms off and escapes. Everybody converges on Nyx and they revive her. She's okay. This is the only violence that occurs in this takeover. And Nyx, her first priority upon waking up is to go to these dead mastiffs and with her horrible necromancy raise them as craven abominations unto life itself. And I think we just get one. She names it Hamburger. And it is her companion for quite a while after this, to the horror of everybody else.
Excellent.
I think it will be a little while of this is something that builds over time, but every time the party goes back and checks on this situation, it's gone on a little more. But in the power vacuum that is left here, Ismark becomes the burgomaster of Vallaki. He has the training from his father and the will to do it, and also was the one who spoke up in the crowd and would not allow this to go on as it did. So he will be trying to rise to that responsibility as we go along. But Victor Vlakovich has been seen fleeing into his window in the burgomaster's mansion, and a couple members of the party decide that this is something that they want to check on right away. We've had a lot of mystery around the burgomaster's mansion, and we want to run to this to see what's going on. So, even though
I think we had also just leveled up.
Ooh, yeah. So we're really feeling ourselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, despite the fact that none of their companions accompany them, mad scientist rivals Lucian and Peregrine run into the burgomaster's mansion and get up to the attic on their own. This is our first time coming up to Victor's room. We see the sign on the door that says "All is not well." We see this magical sigil inscribed upon it, and we kind of hear somebody moving around inside. Both of them,
and we're invisible.
Yes, both of them have cast invisibility before moving through this room because it's this dark labyrinth of attic nonsense. So they are holding hands so they can keep track of one another while invisible. But when they get too close to this door, one of their feet creaks on a floorboard, and the noise that is inside suddenly stops. And spooked by this, they let go of each other and jump apart and hide. And so now they've lost track of where each other are while invisible. And the door opens, and there is nobody there. A skeletal cat, after a moment, kind of wanders out into the attic. What neither of them know, because neither of them have see invisibility on, is that Viktor Velakovich has cast greater invisibility on himself and is standing in the doorway because he heard somebody out here, but he doesn't see either of them because they are invisible. It is after this moment that Kayla makes this meme for us. Which, for anybody who doesn't recognize it, is Kayla's adaptation of this meme.
Or sometimes there's 3, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think there's 3.
And it symbolizes this invisible standoff that we are having. At some point, I don't remember who it is, one of Lucian or Peregrine makes a noise. They say something or they do something that makes a noise.
Must be Peregrine's fault.
And with his surprise round action, Victor casts Cone of Cold into the room and gets both of them. The skeleton cat who wandered out is absolutely annihilated. One or both of them is knocked unconscious. It's a tremendous amount of damage. And Victor doesn't wait to see what the fallout of that is, because they're both still invisible, whatever has happened to them. He just turns and casts Fly again, and I think straight up melts his own window just to fly out of it, and is gone. And now we do not see him for quite some time. So everybody survives this situation, but we have a greater understanding perhaps of how dangerous Victor is. And we're going to be on the lookout for him in the future. But
And we had to go jump out the window to get away alive.
you did not at all, but you did jump out the window.
We did. Oh, well.
You did not have to do it. He was already gone. But you
jump out the other window and run home.
You did do that. And it was great. We spent a fair amount of time figuring out the fallout from this, but one of the after effects is that we get to finally explore the Burgomaster's mansion properly, which is also something that is happening at this time in the Prime campaign, because in both of them now, the Burgomaster has been deposed and arrested, is being held in an otherwise abandoned building in Vallaki, and this place is opened up to us. So we get to crawl over it a little more than we did before. Alpha at this point finds Izek's room with the dolls in it and realizes the horror of that situation. Both parties come into a changing room that has 2 things in it. It has a wedding dress, which doesn't really ping anybody's radar at this time, but we'll come back to it later, and has a mirror in it. So this is a situation where I laid a bit of a trap, because in both parties there is a character who pretty much constantly is walking around with detect magic on to analyze everything that they can. And so I knew that each party would have specifically one character be subject to what happens when you look at this mirror and do detect magic or identify or whatever you would do to try to figure out if it's magical, which is that a message appears on it as if there were mist blown onto the glass and somebody used their finger to write this message. It just mysteriously appears. The way that I handled this was, I think I did this the same or close enough. I sent that text of that message to just that person, or like in the Roll20 chat, such that I knew only that person would bother to go read it, probably. And I tried to create a situation where nobody else had access to that text, because my hope was that that person would read the message out loud in character, which would establish that they are themselves, that character is reading out the message as they are looking at it, which is what triggers what happens next. So Ashley, playing Shava as their magic detector, reads this message and immediately specifically says that without saying anything, she goes to her party and writes it down and shows it to them in a different room, and they discuss it at length at that time.
Wow.
That's really smart.
Peregrine, played by Duncan, reads it out loud in character voice immediately.
Doesn't say creepy incantation out loud.
What's that?
What? Sees creepy incantation, definitely doesn't say creepy incantation out loud. With a broken mirror, if she didn't think that would also probably cause other problems.
Yeah. So
It's really smart.
Yeah.
what happens when Peregrine reads this message is that this shadowy figure becomes visible to her in the mirror, and her alone. Lucian is kind of there looking on at an angle and does not see this. And this was suggested by the text of the poem, but I believe that the shadowy figure makes it more clear. Basically says, name somebody, and I will go and kill them. And that is how this mirror works. It is a ghost assassin, and I have a stat block for them that if you name one person ever, it will never function again. It will go immediately to that character and try to kill them. Peregrine believes in swinging for the fences. So she immediately says, Strahd, which triggers the other extremely specific use case of this mirror, which is that if you say Strahd's name, he intercepts that this is happening and takes control of the situation wherever he is. The ghost's image disappears and Strahd's image appears instead, and looks at Peregrine and basically says something to the effect of, so you're very bold. And Peregrine immediately has to do a wisdom saving throw.
Ooh.
And fails.
Oh.
And Strahd says, I invite you to come to Castle Ravenloft. I would like to discuss this with you further. And his vision disappears. And I tell Duncan, you have been charmed by Strahd. While you are charmed in this way, you cannot attack him or directly damage him in any way. And you will not immediately, against the advice or the restraint of your friends, try to go to Castle Ravenloft. But if you get the opportunity to go there and to bring your friends with you, if you can, you will take it. And Duncan says, okay. And we move on. And Peregrine lies to his companions to her companions about what she saw.
Are there any other edge cases to this mirror?
That was the only one. And Duncan went directly there.
Trying to kill Rahadin potentially.
Yeah, if you had spoken Rahadin's name, it would have gone for him. The ghost doesn't need to know who these people are; it will find them. Because I have a stat block for this ghost, it's not that it necessarily definitely will kill them. There are characters who would win that fight or could escape it, such that the ghost. It doesn't tell me or I'd have to read it again. This was not something that came up, so I don't recall exactly if it has the talents to chase people down to the ends of the earth. But some people, certainly, if you had said Lady Wachter, there's no chance of her surviving this encounter. Others like Rahadin, with his hit points and with his skills and resources, potentially could destroy the ghost or get out of it some other way.
I remember being extremely distraught. Me, Jack, not Action, because Action wasn't privy to this situation, but Jack, was distraught that he didn't just say, Victor, just nip that in the butt.
It would have been very unlikely for Victor to survive this.
I think Duncan did say he almost said Victor.
Yeah, it was. That was the next option, but he was a great crazy man.
That would have been really close. Yeah. So instead we get this, and we move on from that. While Prime is searching this mansion, they have, Tox has been all through here before, so nothing that they find here is really news to them, except one thing is different from how it was before. When Tox comes back and meets this ghost of a maid again, she is noticeably less cogent and less composed than she was before. She is plainly terrified. Her form seems somewhat less substantial, and it is much harder to carry on a conversation with her. This is where I'm going to talk about my third slide of the So You Died in Barovia category. And I think this is where we start to begin to get a sense of exactly how not safe you are as a ghost. Tox, I don't have a totally religious number here, but I think it's pretty safe to say, has succeeded 4 or 5 of these charisma checks in a row and failed none of them. So let's talk about what happens when you fail a check as a ghost. I modeled this after levels of exhaustion. So what happens when you fail your first check is you reach the first level, which is that you have disadvantage on all ability checks from then on, including charisma checks. Hey.
I will be right back. My phone is dying, but I have to take Burton outside because he's
Okay.
letting me know he needs to take a giant dump.
Absolutely. I will catch you up on this later.
Okay.
There is no way to revert these, to go back to a previous state. You cannot rest and recover this. Once you begin to have disadvantage on ability checks, including your charisma checks, it's much more likely that you hit other tiers past this. The second tier is that your speed is halved. After that, you have disadvantage on all saving throws, which maybe as some of these in especially dire circumstance. I think against the wind, I was letting people make charisma saving throws, which you might have a better bonus on than just a flat charisma check. We never had anybody get to level 4, so I never actually came up. It's like it halves your hit points in the actual exhaustion levels. I never came up with a ghost equivalent of this. But the fifth one is that your speed is reduced to 0. You can no longer move. Tox at some point did meet the ghost of an old woman who was just standing in the road, barely still visible, just a figure of mist looking around mournfully. And this is the last stage before the final one. If you reach the 6th level of exhaustion as a living person, you die. In Barovia, where we already know at this point, Prime does, that the general mists floating around they seem to have this intelligence and this tragic sentience. These are the souls of people who have died in Barovia who have fully discorporated, who have reached this level by attempting to interact with the world where they no longer are able to hold on to their identity or their memories in any way. They are simply pure soul stuff that has floated out into mist. It still has this collective melancholy sentience, but anything of their individuality is lost forever, which, if you were to remain a ghost and hit this level, would be the fate of a player character, at which point I would say, okay, yeah, let's bring in that Grave Cleric now. This would be the time.
Aha. So there was a chance.
Yes. We move out of Vallaki at this point. Our festivals are done. Our burgomaster's overthrown. Prime is on a mission. For too long have we suffered Tox to be dead. We are going to head to Krez to get him raised. But we have this new party member, Esmeralda Davenir, and she asks that we make a stop on the way there. So we take a detour, and we come to this tower at the side of the lake with a strange wagon next to it. She says, "This is my wagon. I drove it here. We're going to go ahead and get in this so that we have a vehicle to ride around in. Also, it's super awesome, and because you have me with you, I will just tell you how to get into it without setting off the devastating trap that is hidden within." I think that somebody was staying in this tower at some point, but I have not really figured out a good way inside of it. I think she's had climbed up to the highest point at some point, but has not figured out how to get in the front door. So we're not really worried about this too much. We move on for now, and we rattle off down the road to Krezk. So this is Prime arriving in Krezk for the first time. We meet the burgomaster and burgomistress here. We spend the night. We are preparing to go up to the abbey in the morning and meet this abbot who... the townspeople, it's news to them that he can raise people from the dead. They have not heard what Father Lucian has heard, or it hasn't widely gotten around that he can do this, or maybe they don't believe it. But they are able to tell them generally about the abbey and what a weird place it sounds like it is. During the night, Tox wanders around and sees the shades of Krezk, including the burgomaster and burgomistress's. I think he kind of glimpses maybe that they have the ghost of one of their children in their family graveyard. But he is pulled away to something else. He hears the sound of a woman crying out in pain from within a house that a lot of people are gathered around, and goes to investigate. And within, he sees that this woman is giving birth. And he can see something that nobody else can, which is that as she grows nearer and nearer to the actual act of having the child be born, all this mist is seeping into the room that nobody else can see. He's recognized by now that some mist is so thick that even the living can see it, but there is some level of mist that the living cannot see, that he can witness and they cannot. And it is coming for her, and specifically for her pregnant belly. He waves the mist away, and a child is born who does not cry, does not scream, and the villagers seem very distraught over this. There is lamentation. It seems that the woman is giving birth to twins, something none of them realized until just now, because she is still in labor. Something is still coming. And the mists try again to comfort her. And this time, Tox stands back. And some of the mist whooshes into her stomach, and the next child, this other twin that is born moments later, screams and cries, and there's a huge sigh of relief throughout this hut. And Tox can see that all the mist that was coming into this room has gone into this second child, so he realizes perhaps that...
no, he doesn't realize this. He's completely distraught until way
he's
later.
completely distraught. I think I tell him in the post-campaign wrap-up. There was only enough mist for one child that was coming here. He did not choose that one of them would not be born with a soul. He only determined which of the twins was born without a soul.
There was actually going to be enough mist for both of them, but he waved some of it away, and so then all of it went into one of them, and now that kid has like giga soul, and he's like, yeah, let's go, everybody.
This is
I'm just a really exciting person.
This is, I think, what Tox believed, that he had caused one of these children to be born without a soul.
So freaked out. I don't think he told any of us about it.
No, and certainly did have. Even in this case, is an extremely lasting impact in the fates of these twins that no one else but Tox would ever knew he played that hand in it. But here we discover, I think, pretty dramatically, an interaction between the mists and the Barovians, who we've been seeing this whole time. These are the ones that Tox is capable of possessing, that give off this vacant, echoing feeling, as if they are missing something that the other Barovians have, as if there is a space within them that makes them potentially subject to possession by a ghost that the others do not have, and reinforces what we were just talking about, that it is the mists that encompass Barovia that make it impossible to leave Barovia, that are the souls of those who have passed beyond and seek more than anything to be reborn into a new host. If they are kind of this just collective dispersed mist, then probably that person will be alive without any feeling like they are a soul that has been reincarnated in this way. But it could happen, theoretically, that a soul that did still retain something more of its identity could be reborn, and what the consequences of that might be.
Could Tox have swooped into the lady?
And been reborn as one of the kids? I think at that point we also would have been rolling up that grave cleric.
Yeah.
That honestly was not something I considered, but I think I would have been like, all right, cool, Tox is done. We're gonna have a child who, when they're like 8 years old and kind of developing like stuff, they're gonna have like really weird memories that aren't theirs, and like all these personality traits that don't make sense for a Barovian child, and will eventually discover this tragic history of themselves potentially. That would have been a whole other thing. Oh my God, I'm glad we didn't have to deal with that. Jesus Christ. So Prime, at their earliest convenience, makes their way up the hill to the Abbey at the top of Krezk. They meet the Guardians and the Caretakers, these mongrel folk who are by and large crazy and kind of monstrous, but they seem pretty harmless. They go and they meet this abbot and his companion, whom he says he introduces as Vasilka, and doesn't tell them everything that he has in mind for her right now. I don't think. Maybe he does. Maybe this does happen now, because I think you guys were pretty persuasive with him. But clearly there's something kind of off and creepy about the both of them, finding them in this scenario, but he does volunteer. He says, I will raise Tox for you, and in fact, I do not require your diamond to do it, which I realized, Sparky and I had this conversation from last time. He's like, I don't remember Derek actually doing this thing where Tox stuck his head in a chest and determined which one was the diamonds. And I thought, no, did that not happen? Well, then how do they know which one is the diamonds? Oh, I did just tell them, didn't I? Because at this point, they had spent so much time talking about and looking for diamonds that they were certain they would need to raise Tox from the dead. And I knew they absolutely didn't. I just really was sick of that whole... I was like, here's some fucking diamonds. You won't need them. And we only find that out here for the first time. He says to them, I have this plan around Vasilka and regarding Strahd, and for it to come to fruition, I want you to bring me a wedding dress. And they go, oh, we know where to find one. We literally just saw one in the Burgomaster's mansion. And he says, okay, if you do that, I'll raise Tox. And they're like, what if you raise Tox now? And they're very diplomatic. And he says, okay, I will do that. I will give you one up front. And he prepares to do this. We have a bit of an encounter here, where as the abbot begins this raise dead ritual, which takes a little bit of time, Tox can see that it attracts mist from down the mountain into the valley, and that he is in competition with this mist for his own body, which the party has brought with them, that the mist wants to inhabit it and be raised as much as he does. He raises the alarm somehow. Dr. Flint has the invisibility on. There's some kind of challenge that I really can't remember the ins and outs of, but so I think some kind of stuff is pulled enough to be like, okay, you guys had to think about this. You had to apply your abilities and brains in any way. And the ritual is successful. And this has been like a really...
like fairy fire on them?
Yeah, that might have been it. That that we have something that happens. Maybe you did this because you could see them, and then that made them visible for everybody else. And I was like, okay, and then you can fight them. I don't know. And we had a number of shadows on the map, and people beat them up, and Tox was able to go into his body. It's been a super long time now, like as players, that Tox has been dead. It's been like a really fucking long time. So I think it's absolutely a cathartic moment when he is finally restored to life. Definitely felt like we had overcome something here. I do think it's at this point that the abbot is willing to reveal something of his plan, or something just of his disposition regarding Strahd that may foreshadow his plan later. Something to the effect of, I believe that love overcomes all. I believe that Strahd would be freed of his curse if only he had somebody to care for. I think it would make him a better man. And if somebody were willing to put themselves in that position, then, you know, it would be a very noble sacrifice of them. And I think eventually it would be for their benefit as well. And it would really save this land. Because I remember Christy as Esmeralda specifically going, that's bullshit. That's fucked up and stupid. And him being like, whatever, that's your opinion. And the party kind of walks away. My impression of this, and my memory of it, was that this abbot has kind of given them the closest thing since Stanimir to suggesting, like, yes, Strahd is cursed, and really somebody should try to do a kind thing about that. But they really don't like kind of what has been suggested as part of this. So I think we come away from this with pretty mixed impressions and feelings. And like, okay, we're going to kind of leave that thread open. We are going to go get your wedding dress. We do intend to do that, but maybe we're not going to make it our most immediate priority. So we'll get into some other stuff on the way. So the party returns to this tower on the side of the lake because they want to know more about this. And it's about the same time that Alpha arrives at this tower at the same time. And they find somebody there waiting for them, because something I didn't follow through on him before is when Rictavio, the carnival master, joins them in the fight at the coffin house, he realizes at a certain point, okay, you guys are going to be fine. We've turned the tide. Like, the vampires are running. We haven't destroyed them, but none of you are in mortal danger anymore. Before the guards descend upon this situation, and I'm asked a lot of questions I don't want to answer, I'm going to leave town completely. But, much as he told Prime in their other campaign, he tells them, you can seek me out again at this tower to the west of town at the side of a lake. So when they arrive here, they find Rictavio waiting for them, and he has been using this tower as a hideout for a while, so he knows how to open the door. He invites them in, and inside this tower, no magic can function, so his hat of disguise does not protect him. So he immediately, rather than try to draw out any kind of deception, tells them, I am not in fact Rictavio the half-elf. I am the vampire hunter Rudolf van Richten. And a difference about him in this session from the previous one where he appeared is that now he is being played by Luke. So we've introduced these two characters of Esmeralda and Van Richten pretty close together. This was happening at about the same time. They really weren't too far apart from one another when they joined the campaign. I wrote for Christy like an 18-page document detailing everything Esmeralda would possibly know about everything, trying to make it as succinct and pop out as possible, while also having a breakdown of all of her spells and abilities and when might be good times to use them. And the one for Luke, I think, was like 22 pages.
Jesus.
And I would say Luke especially did a really great job gobbling that up, and we had a lot of conversations about it beforehand. Because what I really wanted for that was to not be having to remind them of things that they knew during the session, which I thought would bog things down, but with the hope that they could just speak from this document as their own memory. And Luke does an amazing job at this from this first session, absolutely takes off with it, and will check in with me about details in between sessions. But
you would genuinely think Luke created this character. Like, he embodied Van Richten. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have some things are largely the same in our encounters at the tower here, but some things are different. I'm going to kind of take them bit by bit. So when Prime returns here to investigate it, they don't know an easy way into this tower, but they come and they look at the front door, which has this very particular symbol on it. I'm not sure. I think I showed this to Alpha for like a moment, but I was like, but Van Richten has been here, so he knows how to open this door. He does a quick thing for you and it opens, and we're going to kind of move past that. For Prime, this is more of an obstacle, but only momentarily, because Derek figures it out in like 30 seconds, I want to say, or less. And we get one of my favorite things that I've had in a Zoom call D&D, which is where Derek starts to describe what he's doing, and I'm like, no, Derek, I need you to get up and do this for me. So Derek has to take his headset fully off so that he can walk far enough back from his camera that it will capture enough of his body and frame. The solution to this puzzle...
Is he doing it? Is he doing
it? I'm not looking at the screens, but
No, I can't see the screen.
we have these lines that bounce around, and there's like clear endpoint, starting points. It actually says specifically in the book, it doesn't matter which one you choose as your start point or your end point. If you start at one and end with the other, then it works just fine. But to do a little dance, as depicted by the stick figures here, to kind of go in sequence from one pose to the next in front of the door, and it will open, which is a charming little puzzle, and I love that it's simple enough that they were able to encapsulate it in just this little diagram, and that we got Derek to do it for us. If you fuck this up somehow, the penalty is extraordinary. And I'm going to find that, if I can, really quickly, just to read kind of what happens here.
This is like a mushroom dance.
Yeah. It is very similar, actually, to the mushroom dance from Undertale.
It felt a lot like Cactar from Final Fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you... Which of these is it? It's this one here. If you touch this door before doing this dance, then everybody within 10 feet of the tower has to succeed a dexterity saving throw as just lightning surrounds the entire tower and does 4d10 damage to you if you fail your save. And it will just linger there for 10 minutes as like a force field around the tower. If you... So this is interesting. Because this is, they consider this a trap, that doing the dance will both open the door and disarm the trap. So if you do this the first time, and the second time, I guess, the same thing will happen. If for some reason you touch this door for a third time after those durations have elapsed, then the tower entirely collapses. Anybody who is inside takes 24d10 bludgeoning damage, And anybody outside has to succeed a saving throw or take 8d10 bludgeoning damage as it entirely falls apart and almost everything inside of it is destroyed. There is also another interaction you can have with this tower that nobody had. This is caused by... Let's see. What was it that triggers this? I didn't write this on the slide, did I? Sure didn't. That would have been a great thing to do. Here we go. If you do the dance, but screw it up, you do the arm positions out of order, it summons a dragon to fight you. Yep, this is a young blue dragon, which, fun fact, is the only dragon that can appear in this campaign. Yeah.
Oh.
So, sorry we didn't get that moment, but also, like, not, because, oh my god. So Prime does get in the front door, and they check out this tower, and I described to them that on the first level, there is this flagstone in the floor, and it has these chains that go up from the corners, like, all the way to the top through these holes in every platform, and then come all the way back down, and the other ends of the chains are held by these, like, these clay statues. They determine immediately that no magic seems to function inside. And we have a hard time figuring out what, if anything, to do with this. We try going and standing on the flagstone and nothing happens. Somebody stands in the doorway of the tower and says, like, go up, and nothing happens. And we kind of aren't really sure how to activate this. We spend a lot of time on it, and we cannot figure out a way up. Eventually, we decide, well, there's this scaffolding that goes around the outside. Let's try to climb that. As we are doing that, some werewolves show up. Both parties have a werewolf encounter here. In Alpha, this is Luke's very first fight as this character, and with this party in this campaign. So 3 werewolves show up and attack, and it's a tutorial fight for him, basically. They don't put up much resistance. They're put down pretty easily. In Prime, I run the encounter as scripted, where I think it might be 5 werewolves and like 16 wolves, which it may be difficult to tell at first glance the difference between them, but it's quite a more significant force. They show up as Prime is climbing the scaffolding, and I think maybe directly after some of it had like collapsed and dropped somebody on their ass. So in the Prime encounter, the wolves and werewolves are chasing a horse, and they recognize this horse. It is Rictavio's horse, Drusilla, and he is nowhere in sight. We roll initiative. They're very far away, and
really far away.
And
so far away.
Drusilla is almost immediately, like, she doesn't do well enough to get away from these werewolves without provoking. She takes some damage. Clearly, things are about to go badly for her. All of Prime runs into the tower. They send Hellbender off toward her, and I say, like, does Hellbender, like, make an intimidating noise or something? And Sparks says, sure, and he rolls a charisma check, and it's a 2. Drusilla is devoured by the wolves.
No.
My intention had been that if anybody had shouted, stop, then the werewolves would have stopped. But nobody did that, and I thought, you know, why would they?
Drusilla?
Yes.
Yeah, that's weird, because I just, like, randomly named that doll Drusilla and had absolutely no recollection that there would ever be a character in Strahd named Drusilla.
I wonder if that's really true, because
She's on the other side of the window from me.
Drusilla is a pretty popular name for female characters in horror. Specifically, there's a Buffy character named Drusilla that I always think of. Like a lot. Like
one, I've never seen Buffy.
Yeah,
and 2,
I think that
I forgot about the existence of a Drusilla in this campaign. So
I thought you had named her after the Buffy character.
Yeah, I think it's
she's very creepy.
I think it's something that possibly has, in, you know, I think perhaps subconsciously has seeped in as a more gothic sort of female name, which I think is why it appears here, and perhaps why it appeared for your doll. While feasting on Drusilla, one of the werewolves stands up and shape changes into a guy, which is how we learned that any of them are werewolves. I think we could have imagined perhaps that they were just wolves before then. This is Kirill Stoyanovich.
We definitely all thought they were just wolves, and that saying anything to them would be meaningless.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
at all.
But it doesn't really matter. He steps up and he's like, "Who the hell are you people?" And they say, "We're friends of the Vistani," which is kind of true. And he goes, "Oh." They roll pretty well, unlike persuasion or something. And he's like, "Oh, okay." And they clearly don't want to fight, and he doesn't have any specific orders to do anything about them. So he and his wolves take Drusilla's remains, and they leave, and do not oppose the party at this time. Something that the party doesn't know, but we'll learn later, is that when Rictavio was on his way from Vallaki to his tower here, or back and forth, or out on the road at some point, the werewolves and the Vistani ambushed him. Just as kind of like a bandit sort of effort, but also because of the events at the coffin maker's shop, he had kind of made it onto Strahd's radar as like, maybe this is somebody more than he appears. They capture Rictavio. His saber-toothed tiger runs off into the forest. Drusilla runs off into the forest. Given those options, the werewolves and the wolves decide to chase Drusilla, hoping to make a meal of her, while the Vistani take Rictavio back to their camp, where he will remain their prisoner for some time. Did he tell you this at this time?
I think he told us.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why we thought they were had any connection to the Vistani.
Yeah. Okay.
And we were like, yeah, we're friends with the Vistani.
Sure.
Did Esmeralda hear any of this?
Esmeralda hears all of this, but doesn't know who Rictavio is. She's looking for Rudolf van Richten, her mentor. That is her reason for coming to this land. And nothing in their description of Rictavio makes her think that it's him. Drusilla is not a horse that she would have known. And other companions are more newly made still. So this doesn't register with her. So during the alpha fight with the werewolves here, it takes place, everybody's outside the tower, out the front pretty much, when this goes on. And at some point during the fight, Nyx scrabbles underneath Esmeralda's wagon and notices there is a trap door in the bottom. And opens it and comes up inside. And the trapdoor in the bottom of the wagon is the only safe way to enter the wagon. It is the main door, which is locked, which will cause the entire thing to explode with the 100 alchemist fires that have been rigged in a deadly booby trap. So it is purely by chance that the party tries this before trying to get through the lock on the back of it, because Van Richten is also able to tell them, this was not here last time I was here. And in fact, I'm really upset to see it here, because I know who this wagon belongs to, and I know it means that a associate of mine has come here, and I'd really rather that she didn't. Van Richten is very vague, like kind of openly vague. He's like, I'm not going to tell you everything about myself or why I'm here or what I'm doing, but suffice to say, I'm a vampire hunter and I'm hunting a vampire, and I think we should team up. So he doesn't tell them much more about Esmeralda. I don't think he mentions her name at this point, but he realizes this is something he's going to have to face at some point, that she must be around here somewhere. Alpha figures out everything and dresses down this wagon for some gear, but leaves it here for now. Both parties continue from here.
I wanted to interject something really quick.
Yeah.
Discord wasn't picking me up. That fight was particularly funny because we were like in a defensive position at the tower with Rictavio there, and the like handful. I don't remember how many werewolves it was. It was like 4 maybe or something.
Yeah.
But they showed up and they were like, "Hey, like, what are you doing here?" We're like, "We don't want any trouble." And they were like, doesn't look like you have silver weapons." And we're like, "Nope, sure don't." And then they were like, "Get them, boys!" And they would just absolutely lit them the fuck up. All of our weapons were magic. Most of our party does like ranged magic damage, and they're like, "Oh god, oh fuck."
Yeah. Largely firebolted to death is my memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of fireballs.
That was kind of our way of doing everything.
Yeah. Both parties move from here to the Wizard of Wines because they have heard that the Mardukov delivery was late. Maybe there's something going on here. In Prime, after they pretty much save Vallaki from Strahd, so it seems at the Feast of St. Andral, and the Burgomaster has been deposed. They've had a couple of people saying a couple things to them. One of them is Lady Wachter has said, well, it seems like the people have spoken, and the Burgomaster has been deposed. If I could serve this town by temporarily filling a leadership position, then of course, it's the least that I could do to do that for a while. And the party has kind of gone, okay, all right. And the Mardukovs have said, hey, that was unambiguously heroic. If we can just remind you that we had mentioned this to you at one point, but it seems now you've dealt with other more immediate local things. Perhaps this can come up the chain a little bit. Could you please go check out what's going on with the Mardukov, with the Wizard of Wines and all that? Whereas in Alpha, there's kind of been, as they've continued to talk to the Mardukovs have been like, just like, you know what? If you want to be helpful, like go to the winery and try to help. Yeah, just go try to help, because we have the sense that something bad has gone on there, and if you want to be hanging out here and talking to us, then go try that out and see what's going on. And Alpha's like, man, weird vibes we're getting from these Mardukovs. But anyway, both parties arrive at the Wizard of Wines. I'll gloss over the bit by bits of little fights that are off the beaten path. We can talk about those individually later if people want to. But the main line of it is that we discover that the winery has been flooded with blights of various kinds, that they have stolen magical green gemstones from this place that have been removed off somewhere else. The parties wipe through the winery and expunge it of the blight. They speak with the family patriarch Davian Mardukov, who is appreciative of their efforts. He tells them that at least one of these gems was carried to nearby Yester Hill, where he fears that the druids and the wilderfolk, people who live in the forest and in the hills, who worship Strahd, as they believe that he is an ancient evil who controls the very land and soil itself. They are conducting some dread ritual with one of these gems, and he does not know how long you have before the ritual is completed. Certainly lightning can be seen striking the ring of black standing stones at the top of this hill. Both parties eventually get their shit together and march up there to encounter this. And the encounter plays out largely the same way in the meat of it, which is that as soon as the parties arrive, I begin a timer of how many rounds will pass before the druids complete their ritual. I am told in the book that in order for the ritual to continue, at least one druid must be able to spend their turn chanting while within the ring of black stones. So these are these stakes. As we gain the hill, we can see there's a whole bunch of druids in this ring. There is a giant wicker figure that vaguely resembles a humanoid vampire thing that they are all chanting to. And as they crest the hill, these berserkers start to rise from shallow graves. These berserkers have buried themselves, just with their, faces exposed as a sort of a way to meditate with the earth and the soil itself. And the effect of them rising from these is it almost seems like the dead are rising to oppose the party. These berserkers have pretty serious hit points. They have advantage on their attacks with D12 great axes. They move aggressively and they hit hard and they come from all angles. As the battle unfolds, at some point from the other side of the Ring of Stones, Strahd also emerges, astride Bucephalus, his nightmare mount with a mane of flame, and he regards the fight. He does not intend to involve himself too directly. He is testing these minions of his, which he regards as kind of really primitive dirt people. He doesn't really think that they're capable of very much, but he's interested. They have this ritual that they're attempting to do. He's interested to see if they can pull it off. And in Prime, he is content pretty much to watch this battle and see it unfold. In Alpha, this is his first time seeing them. This is their first time seeing him. Well, that's almost true. One of them has seen him in a mirror, and he has seen her through the mirror. And they lock eyes from across the battlefield, and he says, Peregrine, you know what? It's time. And I informed Duncan that he can do whatever he wants with his action, but every round for his movement, he has to move towards Strahd with the intent to go with him, and that he cannot purposefully, hurt him. It is really bad being without your temporary hit point bubble maker, who you've been relying on for so long, especially when berserkers are hitting you from every angle and doing a ton of damage. And we have Van Richten with us now, and his healing is extremely important here, but we cannot figure out a way to break the charm on Peregrine. None of the party knew that she was charmed. She has kept this a secret until this point, so none of them really know why she is just moving towards Strahd in this way. And she was out toward the front of the pack already, so she reaches him. And she can see what he sees when he looks to the west, that there is this city of mists, which is depicted in this art here, that he is regarding from atop this hill, and he tells her it is a homeland to which he can never return, that appears here to remind him of what he has lost. And he invites her to climb astride Bucephalus with him. She does, and they begin to ride off together over the air. Bucephalus walks upon the air toward the east, toward Castle Ravenloft, and the party is not able to intervene. They ride until both of them are gone. The party fights as hard as they can, and they manage to eventually wipe out the druids and the berserkers, but not before the ritual can be completed. At the end of the countdown, the gem within the wicker statue takes all of the vegetation around it and condenses it into a more dense form, which then bursts out and destroys the wicker figure from within. And a tree blight created by this ritual, Winter Splinter, begins to stride down the hill toward the Wizard of Wines. If it reaches there, like Godzilla, it will destroy the building and uproot its foundations, and the winery will be gone forever. The party now has to fight this creature, and eventually they are victorious, but not without great loss. Unfortunately, Hamburger is destroyed.
I am never going to forgive you.
Kayla will never forgive me for this and other subsequent crimes that I commit later. I am hoping that we will be able to talk about Alpha and Duncan's adventures after this moment a little later on when hopefully Duncan will be here when we talk about this. One thing that happens for both parties after this whole hilltop situation was resolved, we have another, a little fight with Blight up here afterwards to kind of finish everything. And after that happens, Cinder hears a voice calling out to her, a whisper on the wind, and she responds to it and digs up a cairn and finds an ancient stone spear stained with blood. This is Kavan the Blood Spear, which normally I think it says in the book it will call out to a barbarian with preference, but it is a weapon that holds a fragment of a chieftain of old of these wilder people when they were a prouder people who did not worship the dirt as these their descendants do, and he longs to be wielded by a true warrior once again, so he will reach out to whichever character in the party is the most bloodthirsty, the most physically brutal, the most capable of using bloodshed and brutality to accomplish their purposes. For Prime, this is Cinder, who picks up Kavan and accepts him immediately, and immediately unlocks his full potential as a +2 spear.
Oh, shit.
Kevin.
And calls him Kevin forever afterward. The character in Alpha who is called out to is Rudolf Van Richten.
Oh.
For reasons, and I think that the fact that this is the case is not at all a surprise to Luke, who knows Van Richten's backstory in full, but may perhaps be a surprise to others. Rudolf Van Richten refuses Kavan. Action.
In this case, it's because he's like, what is this evil spirit? I've seen a billion of you. Fuck you.
Yep.
Fuck out of here.
Action instead picks up Kavan and hopes to wield him. Kavan does not want to be wielded by Action right away. He wants to be wielded by Rictavio and by Van Richten, and will hold out hopes that this can still happen. Does not bond, does not reach full potential with Action right away. And in fact, the whole party tries pretty earnestly for a while to convince Action to give up or destroy Kavan entirely, something that does not happen. We eventually talk through it, but it's a point of conflict for a while.
They were really convinced that he was gonna make me crazy.
Mm-hmm. Are we going to go back to our fight with the Wicker?
We are. Prime has come through this fight. They have also had a hard time, but they have something Alpha doesn't have, which is massive area effect damage. Talks fireballs the entire ring of druids, almost all of them, and Shava casts Hunger of Hadar on almost the entire ring of druids, and almost immediately they're nearly all killed, but a couple of them are still hanging on and a little farther away. It becomes clear that despite having done much of fire damage also to this Wicker figure, it's not going to be enough to bring it down in time.
It is burning.
But it is burning, so in one round, Ashley runs up to the base of the Wicker figure and uses a bonus action to Misty Step up to where she can see the green radiance of the gem coming from its chest.
She goes like inside of it.
Yes.
She Misty stepped inside of it.
Almost inside. I didn't quite let her go like all the way in deep, but enough that as her action, she is able to plunge her hand deeper into the chest and successfully grab this gem. This is the final round of the ritual countdown. When she ends her turn, and she's like, this is on fire, right? And I say, yes. And she says, so I would take fire damage since I'm inside this burning Wicker figure? And I say, sure. And I rolled a couple of d6s of fire damage. As a reaction, when Shava takes fire damage, she can...
No, any damage.
Yeah, sorry. When she takes any damage, as her reaction, she has an ability to Misty Step and be invisible at the end of that movement. With the magic shard in hand, she teleports out of the Wicker figure's heart and is invisible, and nobody knows where she is or where she has taken this thing. The magic glow dies away, the ritual fails, and Winter Splinter is never breathed into life in Prime's campaign, and they do not have to fight it. Strahd is...
a lot of use out of that multiple Misty Step combo.
In derision, Strahd uses Bucephalus' ability to walk into the ethereal plane with him as the rider, and they both disappear, abandoning the druids and the berserkers to their plight. Nice. It is 9:40. I could keep going for a little bit here. I don't want to push on too much farther, but if anybody's up for it, we could do a little bit more tonight.
I can go forever.
I gotta go eat supper, but I will catch up next time.
Before Julia leaves, can I interject something?
Jack, what do you want to say?
Yeah, specifically before Julia leaves, is that the blight fights with like one of the vine one. This was I think this was the start of putting things in Lucian's orifices.
That's right.
Yeah, in the winery fight, Lucian is just fighting a whole bunch of twig blights for a really long time, and one of them just like takes its twiggy fingers and just puts them up Lucian's nostrils as far as it can. And Julia has such a delightful reaction to that forever after, when something is attacking Lucian, it's like sticking things in his ears or up his nose or something, and I never got tired of it.
Fingers,
yeah,
wooden fingers, disembodied zombie hands.
Yeah,
all kinds of nasty things touching my person.
It's really, really great, and I really appreciate you playing ball with me on that, Julia.
Yeah, and Jack, thank you for reminding everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really important that we talk about it.
Yeah. All right. I will, I think, go ahead and maybe wrap it here. I'll just wrap it up with one little teaser here, which is that after this fight, Prime is resting in the Wizard of Wines, and during the night, Shava hears somebody knocking on the roof and inviting her to join them there.
Let's wrap it up with one little.
It's like when Bilbo ends his speech by putting on the ring.
Yeah.
I'm assuming we've also lost Kayla in the same moment.
All right. Shava joins this witch on the roof who says that she is a messenger of the mother and that the mother wants Shava to join her in a flooded town that she wishes to have dealings with her, and then disappears as mysteriously and as cackly as she appeared. And with that, we will stop.